Right. And this is Matt Lessinger and Nolan Dalla, and we are here simply to have an intelligent conversation. How do Nolan and I know each other? We played poker together in Atlantic City in the late 90s, and there were only two legit places to play back then. It was the Taj Mahal and the Tropicana, so you always ran into the same people. I think we were both a little outspoken at the time. It's like if either one of us was at the table, it wasn't a secret. You knew that we were there. And it was clear for me, that Nolan was a very intelligent person. And I liked hearing what he had to say, still do after all this time. Um, we've known each other over 20 years now. And lots of times I'll contact Nolan randomly to ask his opinion on something. I won't waste any time with small talk because I know he doesn't give a shit about any of that. I can just go right in it, even if I haven't talked to him in a year or two, and just ask my question and cut through the shit. And, we can just jump right into a conversation, which hopefully is what we're going to do here. So again, what's the point of this? From my point of view, it's kind of to address the shortcomings of social media, where it's like, we're trying to have intelligent conversations, and sometimes it's just not happening. And for me, when I can have a meaningful, productive conversation with someone of comparative intelligence, that's like one of the joys of life. And without being too presumptive, I mean, I think of Nolan and I as having comparative intelligence, and that's one of the reasons I always look forward to talking with you. Now, it's not to say that you can't have conversations with other people. When I have a conversation with somebody who is clearly of greater intelligence, that it's a pleasure to learn from them. And I might ask some questions of them or steer the conversation, but for the most part, I want to listen to them and attempt to absorb their knowledge. And then conversely, this might sound a little conceited, but it's like when you're talking to someone who's clearly of lesser intelligence, I can also enjoy having a conversation with them, but I think then they should take on the role that I was just talking about taking on, where they should be willing to do the majority of the listening. And I feel like what's happened with social media is that those lines have really gotten blurred, and too many of the people of lesser intelligence are doing the talking instead of the listening. And again, I know that might come across as maybe a little too full of ourselves, like if we consider ourselves to be of the greater intelligence. But if people are talking about a topic that I know nothing about, I'm not going to try to contribute, because what are we doing? We don't have anything to add, so we're there to listen to it. I think you would agree with that. Am I right?
Well, Matt, what a terrific introduction, and yeah, I mean, you've just in your short, introduction there, you've said a number of things that are, I think, quite profound. Number one is that, as you say, if you're talking to someone that knows more about a topic than you do or that I do, we want to listen to that person. And by the way, I would slightly modify the way you phrased it. You said someone who's more intelligent, and I understand what you mean in a general sense. However, there can be people that, for whatever reason, we don't perceive them as intelligent. And I don't. This is going to sound very elitist, and I don't want it to come across that way. But I'll give you an example. If I go to my auto mechanic and he does not read books or follow current events or what have you, but if we're talking about my car, I want him to do most of the talking because that's his thing.
Right.
That's what he knows. If I'm talking to a doctor,
Right.
I want the doctor to do most of the talking because that's what he or she does for a living. If we're talking about some other topic, maybe I or you know more than someone else, so maybe we should do more of the talking. I think you're quite right, though, that social media, as egalitarian as it is and how democratic and supposedly equalizing in this great so-called social media communications democracy, that sounds, and I think when it began, it sounded like such a wonderful thing that we didn't have to listen to all the so-called elites or the professors, and everybody and every man, a common everyday person, could have an opinion, and it could be shared by, and be read by hundreds if not thousands of people. but now we've become, now that's gone into what I call the Kardashian factor, where these kinds of voices, the people that, in my view, don't have that much to say or contribute, somehow get magnified into a full
Yeah.
symphony orchestra. And the college professor who's spent his whole life talking about his subject, he's got 35 followers. I mean, it's a really
Yeah.
upside down, topsy-turvy world. And when you came to me with this idea and you said, listen, people talk, I think this was my phrase, but the way I can phrase it is, people don't talk to each other, they talk at each other. And
Hmm.
social media is really the ultimate reflection of that absurdity. And I find that having this kind of a conversation with you, I'm very flattered by the way that you say we have equal intelligence. I think we have definitely different skill sets, but overall, I consider that highly complimentary, and I do agree with you. But I think what's missing in the thing that you said to me when you came up with this idea about having what you call an intelligent conversation, this being the very first show, you said people want to you want to get past the bluster, the bravado, the sound bites, the quips, the put downs, the humiliations, and just have a conversation. So here I am, and I'm thrilled to be here.
Excellent. And you made an excellent point. When I'm talking about, I should be talking about general intelligence, right? I should be talking about knowledge of a particular subject matter because, speaking uh, about you specifically, for example, I know when you post something about politics or you post something about gambling, right? I know you're speaking from a position of expertise. So I'm giving it that much more weight. Now, when you what's another one like food reviews? You're a bit of a foodie, so it's like we'll put some stock into what you say about a particular restaurant or things like that.
Yeah, but excuse me,
But then
but if
if you are,
but if wait a minute, but if Emerald comes in the conversation, I'll use somebody that everyone knows, a celebrity chef. If they come in the conversation, or Wolfgang Puck, or any number of these other celebrities, then I'm shutting up and I'm
right,
listening to what they say. I think we can agree that there is this um, kind of a hierarchy of knowledge, and you have to know your place and then adjust accordingly.
for sure. And then some people, like you said about the professor with 35 followers. I mean, probably the people with the most to contribute are not participating, which is probably intelligent of them. Like there's probably an innate intelligence to just avoiding social media altogether.
And a
But
lot of
then,
people do. A lot of very smart people do.
oh, absolutely. And then, a lot of the people that are on there, it comes down to marketing, right? Like what you said with the Kardashians. It's like, they've got good marketing. Some of the people with the best things to say are not marketing themselves well. And I am not by any means saying that we have the best things to say, but I think if we're not in the mindset of where, oh, we need to market this, we need to make this attract the most people as we possibly can, well, then we can be ourselves more and we don't have to try to cater to a particular I don't know, audience or clickbait, right? Like we don't have to discuss the most controversial thing possible because we know that's going to, get people strongly opinionated, and then they're going to want to check it out and they're going to want to chime in with their opinions. And it's like we welcome opinions. Like I don't mean to sound like we intend to be an echo chamber. I mean, I think you and I both agree we welcome differing viewpoints. It's just that we would like them to be well thought out and fact based, and not just people spewing the first thing that comes to their mind. I mean, as long as opinions are well thought out and fact based, any opinions are welcome. Like, you don't have to agree with me. I just want some indication that you've put some thought into what you're saying, right?
No, no, absolutely correct. And I think that one of the reasons we were having this discussion and doing, pursuing this, really this experiment, because that's what this is. Now, it's easy for you and I because we have a lot of common thoughts and ideas and philosophies. It would be a little more challenging if there was someone that was not like you and I, or had, let's say, vastly different, let's say, political views. And we'll get to that little more depth a little later. But I find it increasingly difficult and frankly sad that we're not able to communicate with our friends and our families in some cases who have very different ideas about economics, culture, society, the world, the sexes, the races, our place in the world, and what our role should be. I'm 58 years old. I'm not sure. How old are you, Matt?
45.
45. Okay, so you're still a pup, but what if you've been around like I have, and you can remember, let's say the 60s or the 70s when there was a two-party system in this country, and liberals and conservatives, or Democrats and Republicans, had a rapport, and respected each other, and yeah, they had differences, but if for some reason, well, I think it was just, as you say, a common set of facts and so forth. We've just really strayed from that very slowly, and that stray has really been accelerated in the last 4 or 5 years. It's gotten, frankly, off the rails, and that's disturbing to me. In fact, it's very frightening to me as to where we've come. When we talk about communicating with our friends again on the other side of the spectrum, I don't find the communication lines open as much as they used to be, and it's increasingly difficult. In fact, it's quite hostile. And to be quite honest here, before I pass this back to you, and I'd like to ask you a question here, what has accounted for that hostility? I realize that I am extremely passionate. I name call. I use profanity freely. I post incendiary things. However, I never post something that's like memes just drive me crazy, right? Things like that. I do
Right.
not like
Right.
things that are unattributed or are basically yanked out of context, things like that, which seem to really pollute social media now. Memes, false statements, statistics, so-called statistics, basically pulled out of the ass of whatever. It's just completely, it completely makes any kind of discussion impossible. And again, I want to make it real clear. I am not always the calmest, kindest person when I'm discussing or arguing with someone. But at the same time, I also believe that we have to strive to get to what we used to have, where there was a common set of facts. So I'll throw this
Right.
back at you. You heard what I said, but talk about what I call the hostility to reasonable discourse. What would you say is the reason for that, Matt?
I mean, the short answer is social media, I think, but then that's kind of a useless answer, because it's like that's kind of obvious, and it's like, well, what can we do with social media? Like, can we improve upon it, or is it too late? Or has just that ship sailed? I mean,
Yeah,
that's one of the reasons. Again, not to dwell on it too much, but why are we doing this? Um, One of the reasons I want to do this is because hopefully, over time, we might have a select few people that join the conversation and, contribute their viewpoint. And even in comments, if people want to comment after the fact, they hear this and they have something to say. It's like, we can filter that. I mean, it seems rude when somebody comments on something, and you have plenty of content on social media, and some of the comments are well thought out and some of them clearly are not, and you can't just go deleting the ones that you don't like because they're, I mean, you could, but that comes across poorly, I suppose. It's like, hey, I said this and Nolan wants to silence me, he doesn't believe in free speech, da da da. I think there's a middle ground, right? I mean, I think we both believe in free speech, but it's like, what is free speech, right? It's like, it doesn't mean it's a free platform for everyone. It means that I'm not going to censor you. If somebody's commenting on your page, right? It's your page. Like, in my opinion, you have the right to police what is on your page. And if you delete every dissenting opinion, that goes too far.
yeah,
But if you only accept the ones that contribute something, I think that's reasonable. If somebody is just going to come on and say, oh, Nolan, you're full of shit. well, gee, thanks. Can you elaborate a little bit? Why am I full of shit? And chances are that person doesn't have something to say, but maybe they do. And you give them that chance. But then if it's clear that they don't have anything to contribute, then um, their comments are just polluting the space, which I think is the phrase that you used. Um, so that's one of the reasons for these conversations. Like, if this is our space, we can police it within reason, right? We welcome all sorts of viewpoints, especially since we're so like-minded, I think, that we really want other viewpoints. And I don't get turned off when I see somebody supporting um, Republican viewpoints. I'll go political, of course. Um, and the thing used to be like when you're harkening back to the 60s and 70s, there's like, well, don't talk about politics around the dinner table, things like that. But you could talk about certain things still. It's like you didn't necessarily agree, but you didn't come to hate each other because of it. It was just like, all right, we agree to disagree. Um, and now that almost comes across as an insult. It's like if somebody types, well, we'll agree to disagree, it's almost like they're saying, fuck off. And at least that's how it comes across, and which is why there's really no substitute for there's no substitute for face-to-face conversations, unfortunately. In these times, it's not something that's possible. So to me, this is the next best thing, is being able to talk. I think that's definitely superior to typing out responses and just hitting the return button, and it's too late. Whatever you said, and maybe you didn't always mean it, but we see how many people have gotten taken down because of things they said on Twitter and things like that. It's like, I think these more personal conversations have a lot more to offer in general. And so now I'll throw it back to you with my question: is social media beyond repair, or can we improve upon it?
Well, there's the old saying, if mankind, or humankind, I should say, be generically proper here. If humankind created something, it can fix it. If it broke it, it can fix it. So absolutely yes. And I think that this will come across again as a very partisan statement. But we on the left are by nature more optimistic about human nature. We believe in working together, cooperation, common causes, things that require linking arms and saying, all for one for all. Let's get this job done. That is a very liberal or leftist core philosophy. In a sense, the philosophy of the right. This is an oversimplification, and libertarianism to a certain extent is very much based on the individual, the rights of the individual, and so forth and so on. I think most people on the right would agree with that very short, narrow definition. So by nature, we on the left have to have more faith, more optimism as to the ability to work together to improve society. And one of the most important sectors of society is its channels of communication. Social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, other platforms, they have become the town halls, or I should say the town squares of the nation, or of society, of the world. And back, if you go back to the horse and buggy days, there would be somebody standing in the town square reading a speech and everybody gather around. And then in the 1950s or 60s, it was television. You got on television and you made a speech and everybody talked about it the next day. Maybe it was radio before that. Well, today the town square it belongs to everyone, and everyone can enter the space. And so therefore the space, it is essential. It is essential for so many reasons to make the space good, to make it where people can communicate. I mean, I don't know if this is an answer of do you bet the do or the don't if you're, like a craps shooter, are you betting with or against here? It's a tough call, frankly, in terms of being a cynic and a realist. But my goodness, we have to try. We have to try to work together. We have to try to communicate. We have to try to reach out. I mean, what's the alternative? Giving up, saying no, it's not going to work? No, it's with us. This tool, this monster, in many senses, in a sense, is with us. So let's deal with it. Let's try to improve it. And real quick before I get back to something that you raised earlier, keep in mind that this platform has only been around really for a decade or so. I mean, if you go back, say, before 2010, for a lot of people, they just came on social media the last couple of years. I think I've been around on it for about 10 years, probably you about the same length of time. Well, before that, how did we communicate?
Mhm.
Well, probably face to face more and through emails more, maybe texting. And then before that, how did we? So there was not, I think you nailed it earlier when you said social media and the what I call the immediacy of reactions. Like, for example, if we talk, there's a cooling down period, and maybe you get in your car and you drive, and then you have the next conversation. Well, in social media, you're a scroll away from the next conversation, and you scroll, there's another second, and you're in another conversation, and you scroll, and you're in another conversation.
Mhm.
And this is going to lead to the question
Mhm.
I'll ask you: is it's like playing the reels on the slot machine? They just keep spinning, and there's a certain the psychologists have talked about this how really damaging this is in many ways, that if you're not pleased with what you're reading, you scroll, you hit the button again basically, and you wait for the three cherries to line up, and the three cherries line up when you
Mhm.
see something you like, or you see something you agree with, or you see a really funny,
Mhm.
maybe it's seeing a cat video, a kitten playing the piano or something. You look for the three cherries, ding 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 ding, and you're going to stop and you're going to watch that. And then of course there's going to be the things where you don't like and you skip past them and all this. And what I wonder from you, and you have extensive knowledge in a lot of areas, plus the experience to be able to apply this question. Uh, what is this doing to us in terms of our attention spans? Again, we talk about our ability to communicate with each other, and our a certain need to keep feeding the beast with more and more stimulus. Talk about, if you think that's a positive thing, and can we ever escape maybe the dangers of that?
No, I don't. I mean, I don't share your optimism. I mean, I share your general belief that the left is more about cooperation, the right's more about individualism. Although I'll argue that there's exceptions to that. You look at 9/11, which we just celebrated the anniversary of. I didn't feel a political divide during 9/11. I mean, I felt like um, there were some conspiracy theories coming out about, the building imploding and things like that. But I don't think they gained the traction that they would gain today. If that happened today, if the events of 9/11, 2001 happened today, it would be a much different landscape. I don't think we'd be able to come together as a country the way we did 19 years ago. So I do not share your optimism about the future of social media. And I think the example you gave is a perfect example, right? I mean, when you're talking about the three cherries, and for example, being intimately involved with the gambling world, the Wheel of Fortune slot machine. I promise there's a point to this. The Wheel of Fortune symbol appears on the third line, and when that comes, you get a spin, right? And it only appears on the line, I forget the exact statistic, but about once every 60 spins or so. But it appears one off the line far more than that. Like, it appears one above the line or one below the line at least 15 out of 60 times. And the point of that is that you're supposed to feel like, oh, it was so close. When it wasn't really. It was all machines and it was predetermined. But by being one space above or below the line, where the symbol was where you could see it, you had that feeling of like, oh, I was so close. And people are willing to spend countless money chasing it so that the symbol will appear on the line where they want it to. And going back to what you were saying about scrolling through conversations, and now it doesn't even need to be the perfect conversation, right? It's just, you could just scroll, and whatever the hell you land on that, captures your attention, you'll go with that. And we both know there's a lot of confirmation bias, where it's like, if you're already leaning one way politically, all right, Facebook is going to throw at you sponsored stories that cater to what have already been shown to be your beliefs. So with that in mind, it's only getting worse over time right now. Can it be fixed? Not without some serious regulation, in my opinion, because right now it's extremely unregulated. People can sponsor targeted ads, right? If I say something into my phone about a mattress, I mean, this is a bad example, but I say something about a mattress, and then suddenly an ad's going to show up advertising a mattress to me.
Yeah.
Which is scary, but it might have been good intentioned at the beginning. It's like, oh, this guy needs a mattress. Well, then we're going to target your ad to somebody who's more likely to buy one. All right, well, that's pretty, innocuous. But now somebody starts talking about, positive things about Trump. Well, now they're going to be hearing even more positive things about Trump, because clearly that's what they want to hear. And so that's what's going to show up in their news feed. And so as long as that continues to be the case, the divide is just going to get greater and greater.
Well, Matt, let me jump in for a second, because I understand, you throw up your hands and, oh, this sucks and it's getting worse, and I'm gonna give you just a ridiculously, well, it's not a ridiculous example. It could happen. It has happened in this country's history, and that's a civil war.
Mm-hmm.
People taking up arms again. I mean, that, I'm not saying we're going to get there, but that's, don't dismiss that as a possibility. Okay,
I think we're heading that way.
Well, that's about what I was going to ask you. Is I'd like you to address, if you say it's getting worse, I want you to give me some concrete examples of what do you mean by that? What do you think how does that manifest itself, getting worse?
Well, we've already talked about it to some extent, right? We can't, I mean, that's the point of this exercise, is that we can't have a simple, intelligent conversation. And it's not just people we know that chime in. Sometimes it's trolls. And I've gone on record saying this, like, I don't know how troll became a term. It's basically just being an asshole is what a troll is. Like, there's no positive trolling. And I say that on both sides. Like, when people who are, on the left start trolling Trump pages, I believe they're being an asshole as well. So I don't think I'm inconsistent in that. And that's just pointless and adds nothing to our greater good, right? So,
well, I'm sorry. What's
now
just
you
a
add
minute.
on top of that.
Yeah, I got to interrupt you again, because forgive me, but I just want clarity. What do you mean when you say troll, and you talked about Trump pages? And let's suppose that there's some Trump page or a pro-Trump page that's putting out some kind of a whatever statement that we don't agree on, and then you basically, let's say you put links to YouTube videos that show Trump saying precisely what they're saying he didn't say. I mean, where you're showing clear evidence, like this is irrefutable, and is that trolling? Yes, you're going into their territory. You're going onto their battlefield in a sense, and you're saying, "Hey, look at this." Now, is that trolling? Please define what you mean here.
Fair enough. I think that is trolling, but with some degree of something constructive. I mean, I think pure trolling adds nothing constructive, right? So you're talking about going onto somebody else's page. Well, if I go onto a pro-Trump page and try to argue a point, which I'm not going to do, because to me that's pointless. I'd rather have a one-on-one conversation with a Trump supporter and get some back and forth going, which again leads back to this style of conversation. But if I go on a pro-Trump page and I'm trying to say something fact-based or whatever, okay, I might get shouted down, whatever. I wouldn't call myself a troll. Once I start name calling, once I start making sarcastic comments, I think that's when trolling really happens. And
Okay.
a lot of people on the left are guilty of that, where it's like,
Absolutely. And including myself. Yeah.
Yeah, and they go on, they make sarcastic comments. And to me, sarcasm has always been the protest of weak people, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you're not strong enough to, just stand up for what you believe in. So you have this sort of snide way of contradicting the other person. It's like, well, that doesn't add anything.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
yeah. Go ahead,
yeah.
Matt. Excuse me. Go ahead.
No, that's all. Just the way social media is constructed right now, in my opinion, uh, it, it's only going to get worse for two reasons. One, because everybody it can share their opinion, even the ones that don't have an opinion worthy of sharing. And number two, it's like now you have paid trolls. I mean, it all comes back to
Yeah.
money,
Yeah.
but it's like you have people that are paid to go onto the opposing side's pages just to wreak a little havoc. Well, how do we come back from that? I mean, without some serious regulation, and people have to be who they say they are, and they, have to be saying what they truly believe. And it's like, you can't even really police that. You can't police somebody's thoughts. So what is the solution? I agree with the general idea of improving upon. It absolutely needs improving upon, but to me it takes some I don't believe in absolute free speech, and because of that, I think the solution begins with that. I think unfettered free speach is what got us here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's hard
there
to argue
needs
with
to be
that point.
not censorship necessarily, but because censorship has such a negative connotation, right? When you censor somebody, it's like, oh, well, no, I mean, it's like you are people that are not contributing anything worthwhile or contributing something falsely deserve to be censored. Or, maybe there's a kinder word for it, but, they don't deserve an equal platform to somebody that is promoting either something factual or their own personal opinions, and not something that they just lifted off of a questionable uh, other site, that again was paid to be promoted to them because of confirmation bias, because they knew it's something that this person is more likely to believe.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah,
Well,
bring it back to your page. I mean, if you don't mind my getting personal with it. I mean, you have a pretty sizable social media presence. You're not a Kardashian, but you're Nolan Fucking Dalla. You have a sizable presence.
I like that.
How do
I
you
like the middle
personally?
initial F. I'll have to start you. I'll have to start using. That's probably pretty good. That's a pretty good middle initial. I'm gonna steal that from you. Hell, if this
Feel
broadcast
free.
goes nowhere, I just got something out of it, Matt. A new middle initial. I like that. I understand exactly what you're
All right.
asking here, and let me address that. I think
Yeah.
that's a great point.
Sure.
That where you're going is like, and I know everyone listening here has had the same issues. Where do you cut it off? When do you
Mhm.
impose that dreaded word, the C word, censorship? When and if you should you ever use it? Now, I have a very um, tolerant position on that. Now, some people who've been blocked by me won't agree with that. They're usually just completely incendiary or abusive or threatening. And I've had hundreds of those. I've been on media for 10 years, so I've had a lot of
Yeah.
haters. That just happens. More
But
people
that's
you
all the more
contact.
reason that you did the right thing, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
but
it sort of
I have.
demonstrates that you were right to do it.
Yes, but I
Yeah.
have people like yourself who make, by the way, very convincing cases. And I'm going to throw this back to you in a minute to tell your story. You talked about being in the customer service business with a jerk off that comes
Hmm.
into your establishment. I want you to tell that story in a minute, but I'm going to make the case first
Sure.
for my position, and then I'd like you to, because you and I talked about this before, and I want others to hear this because it's so, I think, quite profound, and it may even help some people listening. And also, I want to make it clear that I haven't resolved all these issues. When I come in, when I say what I do, I'm still I'm still trying to get my footing here. We're all kind of like
Me too.
going with the flow. But my position as
Mhm.
of right now is as follows, and that's that I will allow almost any comment on my pages, and I get hundreds of comments every week on a variety of topics. Some are really, really brutal, and including very derogatory comments, including racist comments. And I have had people say to me privately, they'll send me a private message, why would you allow that comment to be on your page? And that's a very
Mhm.
valid question. Now I'm going to tell you why. Because I always believe that everything, for the most part, should have the lights on. If I have a bug problem or an infestation of pests, I'd like to see before I apply the raid or the bug spray. I want to know where the bugs are. So I want all of these people to be seen as to who they are. If you erase them and you remove their post, well, you've done them a favor because their friends and family and coworkers and maybe bosses, they won't see those posts now, and you may have just saved them from being fired from work, from embarrassment, from whatever. And for me, I believe that someone should live with the consequences of their actions. That's the way it works. And if you are a overt racist or a hater or threaten people or just full of absolute bullshit, I want to know about it. And I want to be able to look at your post. I want to scroll back to your post and say, boy, I remember what that guy said back 3 weeks ago. He's a real bigot. And so I leave the stuff up for the most part because I want to know where the jerk offs and the assholes and the ignoramuses and the dirt dumb bigots are in the world. I want to know where they are so I can identify them and I don't stumble over them and maybe I don't waste any time with them. Now I'll give you the floor to talk about the other side of that because you have an equally compelling argument for the other way.
I do, I think. And I no, I hear your point. Like, I'm glad you articulated what you just said, because that does probably answer a lot of people's questions about why do you leave a particular comment up on your page when, you know, it, when most of us um, don't think about it in those terms. Like the terms I think about it in are, you know, uh, if I want to visit a post of Nolan Dalla's, and I know that there's a good chance that I'm going to encounter jerk off A, the racist, or jerk off B, the bigot, or whatever, then that's going to make me less inclined to interact with your material. Um, so and it's actually, I don't know whether to call your viewpoint selfish or unselfish because it's a little of both, right? It's selfish in that you want to keep your enemies close, and it's like you want to know who these people are. It's unselfish in that you're giving everybody a platform, even the ones that don't deserve it. But then also, you know, I think you have some responsibility to think about the rest of us that are considering whether or not to post on your page. And why am I going to want to post something on your page when there's a greater chance that somebody with nothing to contribute is going to respond with something racist or bigoted or whatever, just because that's his knee-jerk reaction to, libtards, right? Like he just, his reactions go after them. Um, so going to my example, and the gambling industry is something we both know a lot about. Um, and I started working in Atlantic City back in the late 90s. And there were definitely a couple of high rollers that the casino catered to, unabashedly, no shame whatsoever. It's like, give these guys whatever they want. This guy is worth $500,000 to us every year. Which in the grand scheme of things, that's a hefty amount, for one guy to be worth $500,000. for a casino.
By the way, you mean in gambling? Just so in
Yeah,
case non-gamblers are listening to us, you mean in terms of gambling losses?
sure.
They're not whales,
Yes.
but close to being whales. Yeah.
Oh
Right.
no, those are whales.
Okay.
That's a whale. If
Okay.
you're going to lose $500,000 a year to one casino, that is definitely a whale. So
Okay.
the question is, you know, so it was give them whatever they want, and there were particular guys where it's like, don't look him in the eye, don't wish him good luck. He doesn't like that. Yeah, and that's harmless. Whatever you're trying to do whatever he wants, but then it goes a step further. He's going to curse. He's going to tell you you're an asshole. He is abusive to the dealers. Just ignore it. And nowadays that might not be tolerated as much, but back then it was a given that you tolerate that because who cares about you as the employee? Like, this guy's worth $500,000. Don't chase him away. So if he wants to curse you out and throw chips at you or do whatever, just fucking let it happen. But what that never took into account was how much of a turnoff that is to a lot of other people. Where if I'm not a whale, but I'm a decent recreational player, and I'm walking past the table, and I see this guy cursing up a storm and calling a black dealer the N-word and throwing chips at him, and whatever, well, am I going to want to play there? I don't want to play there. Like, what a negative environment. I mean, putting aside like the motivations for gambling, most people to some extent want to have fun.
Right.
And it's like, you can't have fun around a person like that. So to me, it was a very short-sighted view of how to treat a high roller. So now bring that to this past decade, where I've actually been in a supervisory role in the Oaks Club in Northern California. And one of the debates that I've loved having with the owner and the general manager, and when I say debate, I mean back and forth, like we talk about this a lot, is the concept of addition by subtraction. Like, you have a quote unquote good player, somebody that's there a lot, somebody that contributes to the bottom line. At what point is their contribution to the bottom line negated by the people that they're turning off and
Yeah.
therefore are not
Yeah.
playing at our establishment?
Right.
And so, okay, are we going to bar this player, or are we going to say he's no longer welcome here? Well, what are people's reactions going to be? And if the majority of people's reactions are going to be, we're so glad you got rid of him, and we're creating a much friendlier environment to play in, and the bottom line is likely to go up, even losing that one player's action. And so it's addition by subtraction. And so I think the same thing applies to social media, where it's like, whether we look at it strictly in terms of dollars and cents, or, for people that are monetizing their social media platforms, or just people like myself who just want to have a comfortable social media experience. It's like, okay, I want to have other people's viewpoints, but are they turning off other people to the point where they're not interacting with me, and they would if person X was not in the picture? It's addition by subtraction. And I think that's true even in a monetary sense, where it's like, if you want more hits, if you want more people engaged with your posts, I think you have to get rid of some of the people that you're talking about. That's my opinion. And it's still a work in progress. The addition by subtraction concept at work, I've been wrestling with that for a decade, and it's very nuanced, and there's no simple answers to that. And there's no simple answers to exactly who should be barred from your page and who shouldn't. But I think a good starting point is how many people are thankful when that person got barred, and how many people feel more comfortable now because this person who is spewing so much hate and venom and profanity is no longer somebody you have to worry about being there.
Yeah. Well, very, very well said. It was a perfect antidote to for the point of you're removing a toxic individual, or removing characteristics that will poison a back and forth discussion. I completely, agree with the examples you've given, and now translating that over to social media, particularly Facebook, because you have so much give and take there. I think it's a little different. First of all, we don't have the profit motive. That you're talking about a casino there, and basically what is the objective of everyone in that room? Sorry, all the employees in that room is to increase the profits of the establishment. And in the case of social media, nobody's on social media for the most part to profit. Everyone's there to.
Wait, can I jump in there?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Because that's not my impression. I mean, there's a lot of people that profit off of social media. I agree that the majority are there just to socialize or whatever you want to call it. But I mean, this might be outside the scope of the conversation, but I always had the sense that you did profit, maybe indirectly, but from having more people engaged with your posts.
Yeah, I see.
And there's certainly people that profit directly from that.
Yeah, well, everyone wants to. That's what I call everyone wants to be a somebody. Everybody wants to be heard. Everyone wants to be respected. And I used to hate this term. I used to just loathe it, but now I'm using it because because it's accurate, and that's that everyone is a brand. Remember, he's a brand now. Madonna is a brand. The Kardashians are a brand. Everything is a brand. And so basically, if you have a web page, and I do, you're a brand. Your opinions are a brand. Everything you do is like your identity. You're a company. You're a corporation. Now, in the sense, though, I'm not really selling anything in the sense of I have nothing to market here. My marketing is my ideas, thoughts, interactions, and I am extremely selfish in one way, and that's that I like engaging with people. I like learning. I like teaching when I have the ability to teach someone, And here's the counter argument to what I think you just said very eloquently, by the way, and that's that. And this is what I call the big myth of not just social media, but of all political engagement. And that's that. Oh, you never change anyone's mind. What's the point of it all? How many times have you heard that? You're not changing it. You're just wasting time. Why are you talking about politics or religion or anything? No one changes their opinion. And in the short term, the very short term, that statement is true. No one opens up their iPod and iPad and opens up and goes into a Facebook discussion and then slams it shut. 30 seconds later, they're all right. Damn it, I'm going to vote for Trump. No one's going to do that. I mean, that does not happen. Or damn it, I believe in God now. They're right. I mean, no one does that. But what I think social media is very good at, and this is a core philosophy of who I am and what I do, and that's that I believe in evolution, and I don't just mean a biological evolution or a scientific evolution. I mean a mental or philosophical evolution. We are constantly evolving mentally, psychologically, in intelligence. And what I don't mean generation to generation, I mean within, day to day. You and I, and everyone listening to us, is going to know more tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day than they knew today. They will have acquired a few more days, a few more experiences. Maybe they read a few chapters of a book or saw our TV show. They will have acquired a couple of little things in the building block of knowledge. Now, they may have forgotten some too. For example, as we get older, we lose, I can't remember what happened 35 years ago. You do lose some through time also. But you acquire new knowledge through experience, through engagements, through conversations, through discussions, through arguments. I've had my opinion changed on, this is not an exaggeration. My opinion has changed on everything. Everything. The person I am has been shaped by the people around me, the experiences I've had, the places I've been, the people I've been lucky to talk to. And I got so damn lucky to talk to a lot of really bright people. If I wouldn't have had those engagements, I would be a different. I'd have a different opinion. So opinions do change, and the accelerant here is social media, and particularly Facebook, which will lock us into positions often. But it also, if you have any intelligence at all, and someone makes a really good point on the other side and challenges you, well, it's pressure testing of your ideas. And if my idea is pressure tested and maybe it falls apart, and I've had ideas that fall apart, someone shows me better evidence on the other side, I will change my opinion, or maybe at least evolve and move in that direction. So I think it's very important to recognize that changing your opinion is a good thing. One
Right.
last thing before I throw it over to you. I
Mhm.
remember back in the 2004 election, it was John Kerry running against uh, George uh, uh, George Bush the second, and they were in a debate, and John Kerry was vilified for changing his opinion. A flip flopper, they called him. He
Mhm.
flip flopped.
A flip flop. I remember.
Doesn't matter what the
Yeah.
issue was. It's irrelevant. He changed his opinion.
Yeah.
Oh my God! He changed his opinion. I mean, how horrible is that? To me, changing your opinion is a symbol of strength. To say, to be
Yes.
a man enough, I don't mean to be gender here, but to be a man enough to say, I was wrong. I was wrong before, and now I've been shown this evidence, and now I believe this way. And maybe that if I'm shown some other evidence, I may have a different opinion tomorrow. It doesn't mean being wishy-washy, by the way. You don't change your opinion every minute. But I don't think it's
Mhm.
normal for somebody to be born, let's say, into a certain religion or born into a certain political family or philosophy and keep that philosophy their whole 80 years of life. My goodness,
Right.
don't you get out? Don't you talk? Don't you evolve? Don't you change? Don't you experience? Don't you pressure test your ideas? If you're not changing your opinion on a few things, you're not living. And unfortunately, I see a lot of people, in my view, who are not living.
I couldn't agree more. I think I was actually going to say the John Kerry example before you said it. I swear to God.
No,
Like
really?
I was thinking
Wow.
that. I really
Wow.
was. I was thinking that the flip flopper because, um, by contrast, it's like, when Dick Cheney's daughter came out, and
Uh-huh.
suddenly Dick Cheney was like pro gay rights. Like nobody called him a flip flopper. It was like, okay, good, you're on the right side now. We like it's okay to change your opinion. If a Trump supporter suddenly jumps off the Trump train, like it doesn't mean I'm gonna instantly forget everything that they had, thought prior, but I'm going to welcome them. I'm not gonna be like, oh, how could you flip flop? Like it doesn't. And then even Hillary Clinton, got crucified for that, where it's like she had her um, viewpoints when she campaigned in 2016. And it's like, oh, but what about in the 90s when you felt this way? Well, it's called evolution. It's like, okay, she's allowed to change her views on certain issues over 20 years. Like, gay marriage was not a popular stance in the 90s. It is a popular stance now. It's perfectly okay to have been against it 20 years ago. The majority of people were. It doesn't mean you're an evil person. You should welcome that change of opinion. I totally agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more.
Well,
Like, I
let
don't
me.
know when that became a bad thing.
Well, it is. I think again, social media. It is the savior and it's also Satan. I mean, it's both. And and I find that people that I see very few people starting out a post with saying, you know what, I was wrong or I changed my opinion. You almost
Mhm,
never see a post like that. And by the way, when you do see a post like
mhm,
that, and I guess I'm lucky because I have a lot of friends. I see a few posts like that,
mhm,
and when I see them, you know what? I was talking about that's a line of cherries. I want to read that post. I want to read a couple of things. I
mhm,
want to first of all know what that person who by the way, if they're a friend of mine, I probably have some respect for them on some level. So that's somebody I probably know.
mhm,
So I want to know what. Say I see Matt Lessinger. There's a guy. He changed his opinion about something. What? Okay, I want to know what you changed your opinion about, and then maybe more important, why? What were the factors or the evidence or the data or whatever you saw?
mhm.
Maybe an experience you had, like Dick Cheney. He probably would be back on the other side if it weren't for his own family having to deal with this issue. Issue, that sounds negative, but
Right.
you know what I mean. Dealing with, well, it is an issue for a lot
Yeah.
of people.
Mhm.
So I would like to hear the reason, the genesis for the change, and I think there's a lot of lessons there. And again, the more people that I think come forward and say, I changed my opinion on this because, I think that's really it reinforces that it's okay to do that. Real quick sidebar, if I may. I wrote a
Mhm.
column about 2 or 3 years ago because I didn't want to sound like, and I'm very, very far left on a lot of issues, like revolutionary left, and a lot of people don't like that. But I'm also pragmatic, and it depends on the situation. But I also have some conservative views, or views that would be considered traditionally conservative. So I wrote a column about
Mhm.
2 or 3 years ago, and I said, here's 10 things, 10, not one or two or three. I'm 10.
Yeah.
Here's 10 issues where I agree with conservatives. And like, I mean, that got a lot of hits because people like, oh man, you're always all over, attacking the Republicans, and you don't like conservatives, and you loathe libertarians, which is all pretty much true. But here's the issues where I agreed with the conservatives, and the reason I did that was because I wanted to show it was not a matter of my way or the highway, my team, my country, right or wrong. No, not my country, right or wrong. If my country's wrong, I'm going to call it out. If my team is doing something wrong, I want the coach fired. No, this is not some goose stepping, into the abyss. I'm not going to do that. So I think you have a great responsibility to come out and try to correct the things that are on your side, your respective team, your philosophy, your whatever it is you're a part of, to try to make it better. And so, for example, America, love it or leave it. You always criticize the United
I,
States. Get
yeah.
the hell out of here. No, because I live here. I'm going to try to make it better. I'm not going to move to Paraguay because maybe I like the forest there and that's a cheaper cost of living. And I was born here. My family's here. I'm going to try to make this place a better place. That's what I do, and
Right.
that's what. So this whole idea of abandoning the fight because it's really a mess. And so I want to say that, well, I kind of went long there, but you see what I'm saying is that you've got to try to, I think, first of all, not echo every single position within your either religion or political philosophy, or you have to be looking at really all perspectives, and occasionally admit that there's something on the other side that probably is correct.
So let me ask you this with your, by the way, I remember reading that article. I don't remember the exact uh, 10 issues that you chose, but I definitely remember reading that. I think one of them was like, you believe in individualism, or something to
I
that
don't remember all
extent.
the specifics. I'll
Yeah.
give you. I mean, real quick. Like this
Yeah.
is 10 seconds. Like nuclear
Sure.
power. I believe in nuclear
Yep.
energy. The left is usually against nuclear energy. I'm a big proponent of nuclear power plants. I mean, that's an example. I could give you more, but
Okay.
that's just for
Okay.
example. Yeah.
And that's also partly due to your experiential knowledge of being in Eastern Europe. We'll probably talk about that another time.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Fair enough.
generally agree with you. Yeah. No, that when well, no, good. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah, go
No,
ahead. You
no, go
can.
ahead. No, we're
I mean,
rolling here, Matt. You're an excellent host, and I'm enjoying this, and I think you are too. And I hope the listeners are as well. So please continue. And by the way, for those
Sounds good.
listening, yeah, I know you and I said, hey, we're going to talk about these topics, but I really like that you kind of had this concept of, hey, let's just see where it goes. So I'm curious to know where you're going to take us next, Matt.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I completely agree with your general assessment that we are evolving individually every day. And whether it's through our experiences or something we learn by reading it or whatever, we should be getting smarter every day. I think my argument against social media is that it's taking us sometimes in the opposite direction, where it's like, because you're being targeted with views that already agree with yours, so you're not learning anything new there. And to make it a step worse, a lot of the sites that are being promoted to you aren't even promoting legitimate news. They're very sensationalistic. Sometimes you have to fact check them. And this goes for the left and the right equally. Not equally, but it applies to both of them, where there will be something sensationalistic that appears on my feed that is left leaning, that I'll go and fact check it, and no, it's not correct. And now, besides being annoyed, it's like if I hadn't gone and fact checked it, I'd be dumber than I was when I started, because now I'd be believing in something that wasn't true. So I almost feel like it fucks with evolution when fake news is spread over social media. And I hate the term fake news because it's so Trumpian, but it's like I feel like part of the reason he initiated that term is because he knew it was happening mostly from his side and immediately tried to blame the other side for the proliferation of it. But I mean, there clearly is a lot of fake news out there, and it's just the sides disagree on what's fake and what's real. But since there's so much of it out there, isn't that taking us the opposite direction? Like, aren't there people that you thought you could have an intelligent conversation with them 3 years ago, and now you can't, and you almost feel like they've gotten dumber over those 3 years?
Yeah,
And it's like, you know what? Maybe they have gotten dumber, and it's not necessarily their fault, but
well,
they've been fed a lot of bullshit.
no, that's a great question, great point there. I'd say that, again, getting back to my evolution, I mean, I've come to this position maybe much more recent. This is not something I was practicing 2 or 3 years ago, but it's certainly something I've adapted recently. And this is really more out of self-preservation. My time's valuable. Okay, yours is too. And most people listening, we got families to deal with, and we have things to do. We don't have time for bullshit. And I've decided I'm going to try to weed out the bullshit out of my life. Not all of it, but as much as I can. And one example of that is you talked earlier about blocking people. When I have encountered people that are posting outwardly fake things, like this is, you go to Snoops or whatever it is, you go to
Snopes,
yeah, if you go there and you
that's different from Snoops. Never mind.
I'm sorry, I
I'm sorry, it's all good.
I misspoke. So you go there and you fact check something, PolitiFact, and there are various things you can check out these things, or they're promoting a conspiracy theory, the Clinton Pizzagate story, these child pedophile, wild-eyed, ridiculous things. The deep state. I see the deep state bullshit out there. I've started doing this. When I see people posting those things, they're gone. They're blocked. If they're that far gone, I don't have time for them. I have time for conservatives. I have time for Trump people. I have time for Republicans. I have time for Christians. I have time for Scientologists. You bring anybody on that wants to engage. But when you're talking about, just wacko stuff, I don't have time for that. They're gone.
Good.
That's the end. So I think that we've reached a common ground there. And by the way, I would encourage other people, again, out of self-preservation, don't be fighting against the tidal wave on this. You're not gonna dry off those people. They're completely lost in the sea.
Are they? I mean, so I agree with blocking them. Do you just feel like they're totally lost because one of the points you made was like, you want people to change their opinions?
Well, I think
yes. No changing them?
Yeah, but if there's hundreds of them, you've got to pick and choose. There's 24 hours in the day, and I don't know how many hours you spend on social media. We probably both spend too much. But I don't want to be sitting there fighting. Fighting this used to be the term, the Chinese army. The Red Army. When there's billions of them, you can't win. So what you do is you pick and choose your battles. There are people that you can reach. And by the way, this is back and forth. It's not as though I'm, dictating and saying I know more than everyone and I'm going to try to change. It's not that, but it's just a matter of trying to make optimal use of your time and your energy, and dare I say talent, because you have a talent, Matt. I have a talent in some things. People listening out there, they have talents. I'd like to use names, but I'm not going to use names on this program. I've had people come to me that say, Nolan, you were kind of on the right track here, but you didn't quite get it right. And there'll be people of science, which I know very little about, or mathematics, or these are fields where I'm really very weak. and they'll correct me, and I say, man, thank you for, correcting me on that point, because I want to, communicate well and make my point as best I can. I don't want to look foolish. So it's really nice to be, it's kind of nice to be shown you're wrong, or you
Hmm.
could improve. And when I get those kind of messages, man, that is really, I think first of all, it shows people are reading and they care. And I think that, one of the lessons I take away from that is, whenever I see someone, especially that I know them, I do try to give them some courtesy and respect, even if we're disagreeing. And then if they make the first move and go over the top and start using f bombs, well, that's the question: should you get in the mud and wrestle with them? I don't know. Sometimes I must say there's some sick, maybe some sick thing within me that enjoys the shit out of that. I'm sorry. I enjoy the hell out of a pig wrestling contest sometimes, but I don't want to pig wrestle 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
Right.
Okay, I'll pig wrestle once a day. So
You're
anyway.
very good at dropping the comment that ends the conversation with those people. Like, if somebody starts dropping f-bombs, you usually have the clever comeback that will shut them up, and that's all you need to do. It's like, just shut them up, because it's clear you're not saying anything productive. So, and yes, it feels good to shut them up sometimes. So yeah, especially with as much time as you spend on social media, even if it's not terribly useful, it's you need that good feeling of like, all right, this guy went too far, and he needs to be put in his place a little bit. So, and
Well,
you're the
let
person to
me
do it.
let me run this
Mhm.
by you. Let me ask you this
Sure.
question. See, here's the problem with. See, this is wonderful. You and I are able to expound on our points. We go off on tangents, a little bit wild sometimes. That's okay. But one of the problems with Twitter, for example, if you go over to Twitter, you've got the character limitations, right? So
Mhm.
that is tailor made for what used to be called sound bites, or
Mhm.
smart ass, snarky. By the way, a lot of it's entertaining as hell. But that problem is that's all Twitter's become for the most part. It's become nothing but a fucking back and forth insult factory. It's like what it's like. It's like walking into a firecracker, a factory, and somebody lighting a fuse. You just get explosions. That's all that is. And Facebook, I think, at least because you have longer, you have essentially boxes you can type in the comment section. You can make it long. You can put links in. You can put videos in. You can make snarky comments, but you can also put something from some kind of a academic institution. So
Mhm.
I'd like to ask you about that, about uh, the attention spans, say Twitter, and how that is versus Facebook, which is, when we talk social media, we kind of group them all together, but they're really not the same, are they?
It's sad to think that Facebook caters to people with greater attention spans, where it's like, know,
Yeah,
Jesus,
you're right.
like how
All right, take the
how
pot. You
bad
won
are
that one.
we? I mean, yeah, how messed up are we if Facebook is
Yeah.
the voice of reason compared to Twitter? I'm not on Twitter, for what it's worth. I've never tweeted in my life, mainly for that reason, because when it first came out, I, just like you, I thought it catered to people with no attention span, and it's like, I I think the little time I spend on social media is already more than I feel like I should. I feel like the people that I know that are completely off social media, I have much more respect for them for being completely off of social media. For me, it's just become some level of addiction, where it's like, or fear of missing out, wanting to know what's been going on with people. But I think we'd all be better off without any social media. But going back to your question, um, I mean, yeah, Twitter absolutely caters to the lowest common denominator, which is why it's Trump's preferred method, and that's not an exact. That's, to me, just a fact. Like, it's always been his preferred method of communication, because writing anything longer than that would be a challenge. Um, I like the tweets, so I'm not on Twitter. I don't read them, but sometimes, as you know, on Facebook, people's tweets will be, cut and pasted, so you see them. And the ones that start out like one of eight, two of eight, and it's like, okay, they're writing something that takes uh, you know, eight sets of characters. And it's like, okay, there's almost some logic to that, where it's like, okay, let me read the first set of characters they have, and if what they're saying is something I'm interested in, then I'll go to 2 of 8 or 3 of 8 or 4 of 8. So I almost have a respect for the people that do that. I mean, I do have a respect for the people that do that, because to me, it's like, okay, they have something substantial to say. It's going on Twitter, and it's like piece by piece, you can decide if it's continuing to engage you or if it's just like, oh, this isn't something I'm interested in. Facebook, it sort of loses your attention. I mean, I do a couple of times a year probably where I'll post something really long about something that means a lot to me. And I think, in my mind, it carries more weight because I do it less often. If I
Yeah.
did it every
Yeah.
day, people would tune me out. If I do it once every 6 months, and I'm like, I'm only doing this when it's something that I'm passionate about, okay, then it carries a little more weight. Same thing with those long tweets, where it's like when somebody's taking the time to, hash something out in multiple tweets, I'm going to give it more consideration. As for the sound bites, they're useless. Like I don't even I can't remember how do I put it? I mean, it seems like even the good ones are like a contest in cleverness. It's like who can be the most clever, who can say, something that sums up what everybody's thinking in the least amount of words. It's like I don't want it to be the least amount of words. Like, you and I have each said thousands of words so far, and that's how I want it. Like, I want to hear everything that needs to be said. Like, certain things can be summed up with 1 or 2 sentences, but as a society, we're trying to sum everything up in 1 or 2 sentences, and it just doesn't work that way, and that's not helping us evolve. Getting back to what you were saying, I think it's the opposite effect. I think we're getting dumber, especially as an American society. Isn't it sort of an unquestionable fact that we've gotten dumber over the past 4 years?
Well, that's really something. I'm not. It's funny until you just asked that question. I don't think I know. In other words, I think kind of what you're asking is if you go over to, I'm just going to pull a country out that's kind of similar to the U.S. If you go to Australia, are
Okay.
people in Australia going back and forth and fighting and posting memes and conspiracy theories over there? I don't know the answer to that, by the way. What
Uh,
would be your guess?
my guess would be yes, but not to the drastic extent that we
Okay, so
are.
then why is the United States more nuclear in that way? Why have we just completely shot off all of our
Uh,
missiles over here?
I think the sense of individualism, like everybody is raised in America thinking that everybody's viewpoint is worth sharing, and I am very guilty of that, which is why, you know, uh, I just wanted to have a conversation with you, and the idea that other people might be interested in what we have to say is very conceited and very individualistic, and
Yeah.
everybody feels that way. Everybody feels like what they have to say is something that other people will want to hear. So I don't think that's true in every other country. I think in the United States, people are raised to believe that every individual has this meaningful contribution, which, in a bubble that's, uh, it's good to give everybody inspiration, but in practice, where everybody is now on an unfettered, unregulated social media platform, thinking that what they have to say is important, that's uh, that's making us dumber, in
Yeah.
my
All right.
opinion.
All right. Well, let me run this. This is a two-part question that's will require obviously some elaboration and depth on your part. But you talked about the U.S. being different in many ways, and especially in terms of how we view ourselves. There is what I call a populist strain. Populism is basically a philosophy which means that the common ordinary people can make a difference, and it sounds actually very good. I think there's a lot of negative things about populism, where you essentially cast aside expertise, and then we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing that on social media, where everyone's this equality of ideas and intellect is just simply it's dangerous. So I mean, I'm getting off on a tangent here, but you talked about Australia being different from the U.S. in some ways, but let's take Asia, particularly China, or Asian cultures like TikTok. Now, this is a different kind of a platform. Young people sharing things, gamers, a lot of things on social media. A lot of that's not heavy political discussion. In fact, that's not real common on those platforms. But it is probably the future of social media. I'm not sure Facebook, who knows if Facebook's around in 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I guarantee you something like TikTok where teenagers and these kind of people can be on there sharing, the latest whatever it is with each other. And by the way, when we were teenagers, we used to do the same thing, not on social media, of course, but in our
Mhm.
own way. We would get on the phone and giggle and talk about, hey, did you hear that new song by the whoever? Or did you go hear that? Did you hear that girl? Did you see, what her hair's like? I mean, we used to have this gossipy little world of our own. We all go through that stage, and that's a very powerful economic force, teenagers. Now,
Mhm.
what I wonder is, how will those people be different, and will they have this sense of self-importance that maybe just makes us look like pikers? I wonder about that, because you and I grew up in a non-social media world. We remember what it was like, but a lot of people now coming up don't remember what it's like without things like these social media platforms. So I know you're negative on the future, but is it going to be really, really bad because of this?
Wow. No, that's a great question. I mean, and there's a few different things to address there, I guess. I mean, teenagers should be the only ones to have the kind of time to waste on social media, right? They should be. I mean, going back, I don't think anybody ever thought, and Mark Zuckerberg never thought that Facebook was going to primarily be catering to, middle-aged people. I mean, they're the
Yeah.
target demographic now. Kids don't use Facebook. So it's like whoever saw that coming. But so I agree with you that Facebook will probably either evolve or just be replaced. And yes, things like TikTok. I am not familiar with TikTok at all. Just the most basic concept of what it is. But I agree that social media for teenagers that is avoids politics is absolutely what they're looking for. I mean, that who the hell wants to grow up to be like their grumpy father or grandfather, whatever? I mean, how grumpy are we? The more time we spend on social media, it makes us angry. And if I'm a teenager, I'm like, well, why the hell would I want that? I just want to talk with my friends and gossip and talk about hairstyles and whatever teenagers want to talk about. So absolutely, teenagers need their own space for social media, and it's not Facebook and it's not Twitter. And right now, it sounds like it's TikTok, and it could easily be, several different platforms, and it should be. I mean, that's the positive future of social media. The negative future is for the older crowd. I'm glad you made that distinction because that makes perfect sense. I mean, it's the older crowd that is more set in their ways and unwilling to learn and unwilling to change their opinions. That it becomes social media becomes more dangerous in their hands. I don't think social media is so dangerous in teenagers' hands. It is a little bit when you talk about like cyberbullying and things like that,
Yeah.
but I think largely kids are pretty good at policing themselves with that. Um, I mean, I can't say that with any degree of certainty. It's just a feeling, that. And also, I might be biased being in Northern California, where it's like probably teenagers here are better at policing themselves than they might be in other places.
You mean because
Uh,
they're exposed to so much of the Silicon Valley factor? You mean that,
um,
or?
no, I meant because they're more open-minded
Uh-huh.
and more willing to stand up for bullies, stand up against bullies rather,
Uh-huh.
and people are more willing to speak out here. And so again, that's just an overgeneralization, just a pure opinion. Um, but I think strangely, I think social media will be handled more responsibly by the next generation than it is by this generation. I think.
Well, now you're optimistic now. I like to hear that, Matt. Good. All
It's
right.
going to take a while, but can we make it that far?
Yeah. Yeah.
And can we remove Facebook is indebted to its shareholders, and a lot of other social media platforms are the ones that um, will do a better job of, dare I say, censoring and controlling who has a voice on their platforms. will be the ones to succeed, because I think, unfettered social media, much like unfettered capitalism, it is a failed experiment, right? I mean, we have to tweak it somehow, and I don't have the answers, and you very simply said it needs to be improved upon, and I agree, and I don't have any brilliant ideas, other than in the short term. I think some degree of censorship needs to be exercised, starting with people that are purposely promoting fake stories.
Yeah, I will say this, that about our conversation, you've touched on that topic a few times. In other words, regulation about Facebook, censorship, Zuckerberg's really dereliction of duty
Right.
here, which I think is very clear. But I'm not going to get into that here. And here, the only reason why is I think that's kind of an Alice in Wonderland looking glass. Once we break through, that's a whole different universe of discussion and possibilities. And frankly, I haven't navigated that yet. I'm not sure.
Can I ask you a quick question related to that, if you
Well,
don't mind?
real quick before you do, I just
Okay.
want to say I'm still listening a lot more than I'm talking on that question. Now,
Okay.
if you want to go into that, fine. But I just want to know it's going to be a lot more one-sided because I'm not sure where I'm at. But go ahead and ask your question if you'd
No,
like.
the reason I'm asking the question is because I'm not sure where I'm at either,
Oh, okay.
to be fair. Um, but it sounds like you do feel that it was Zuckerberg's responsibility or Facebook's responsibility, or is it the government's responsibility? I mean, do they have a responsibility to do something before they are mandated to do something?
Well, see, that's again a very difficult question to answer because there's, what is um, what is the right? There's so many different levels here. Real quick, what is the right thing for Facebook to do for its own, business model? I mean, they are a company that is essentially in business to make money,
Right.
and so they've got to think about what is their internal decision that has to be taken into account here, and that's probably the guiding force right there. They're going to do what's best for Facebook, and then the U.S. government. What legal rights does the government or regulators or the FCC or various agencies have in coming into this thing that's grown into a monster?
Mhm.
And of course, a lot of the federal laws, particularly because it's not really a state thing or local thing, it's a federal thing. A lot of federal laws are so antiquated, they're just not able to address
Mhm.
this beast that's just burst out of the cage.
Right.
And hell, we still have laws in the books talking about the Wire Act
Right.
of 1961. Gamblers
Okay.
understand what I'm talking about.
Yep.
The Wire Act. I mean, it's so antiquated, we're not even up to date on some of the internet or online stuff, and let alone talking about the town square of Facebook. So this is the problem is when we talk about should there be, will there be, is there a legal mechanism? We're so far behind the times on this that I'm not. I almost think a discussion is pointless.
Mm.
Lastly, I'll say this:
Mhm.
is that I'm really glad to see some pressure put upon Facebook
Mhm.
by various members of Congress. So we've seen the hearings on this, by the public, by public advocates, and on the other side, freedom of speech advocates, American Civil Liberties Union. I mean, we've had just about everybody jump into this debate and is now active in it. I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good
Mhm.
thing, and
Mhm.
I'm not a huge fan of Zuckerberg for a lot of reasons, but that company, he's going to be around a while, and apparently he's going to control that company. And he's not dumb. He didn't get to where he was
No.
by ignoring people. He's going to have to probably bend, or he's going to be broken. So I think I am optimistic in that way, but boy, I sure wish it would move a little faster.
I think that was an excellent point, that we're so far behind the times in our laws that it hasn't gotten better. I mean, I don't. I'm not even making a political statement here. It's just so many bills have sat on the Senate floor and never gone to a vote. And how are we ever going to update our laws to address the beast? Like you said, I mean, we should be churning out new laws to regulate the internet faster, and like you said, we still have the Wire Act. So yeah, I agree with you completely.
Well, Matt, let me run this by you because
sure.
I'm gonna challenge you a little bit here on this because a lot of we have a lot of libertarian friends, right?
Hmm.
And I want to make it real clear. This is not my position. This is
Hmm.
not the way I feel.
Okay.
But I still think they have a persuasive argument, or at least an argument that needs to be it's legitimate, needs to be addressed. So their argument is as follows: hey, it's an open. It's as long as you're not, it's kind of like fire. That's the old fire in the theater, screaming fire in the theater. You can't do that because you endanger public safety.
Hmm.
But for the most part, you can say what you want, post what you want, do what you want. Let the market. I hate that word, the market. Let the market decide.
Hmm.
People will eventually get there. It may take them a while. Yeah, you may have some carnage or whatever, but the opposite of that is regulation and censorship and blocking companies and people being inhibited from speaking out. I mean, that's a much worse thing. The libertarians will argue than say those of us who want some kind of controls. So what do you say to the libertarian argument on that?
I would say that I tend to agree with the libertarian argument in general, that less regulation is better. But I think you have to be able to recognize when something has gotten out of control and the free market is not working. Right? It's not working because this isn't going to regulate itself. And there's been enough time for it to regulate itself. And it's gotten worse. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. And so that's when the government needs to step in. It's like that's precisely what the government is for, is when things are not sorting themselves out on their own. Then it's like, all right, you need some intervention or else this is going to snowball. And we're already there. It's already snowballing. Talking about social media, talking about the falsehoods that are shared on Facebook, and it is dangerous. I mean, some of them, right now, if we're talking about this moment in time, right, what's happening on the West Coast is you've had all these wildfires, right, that maybe some of them were started illegally, maybe not. We don't know, but there's false stories being spread about Antifa, which in itself is a false flag, organization. Like, it's like, does Antifa even really exist?
Right.
But there's stories going around about how Antifa started the fires. And now militia are showing up in Oregon to deal with Antifa, which doesn't exist. These are dangerous times. I mean, how did we get to that? As Arthur Reber likes to ask regularly, how the fuck did we get here? Right? How did we get, shout out to Arthur Reber, how did we get to the point where wildfires became politicized to the point where one side is showing up with guns to take out the other side who was rumored to have started the fires, and the officials who should be worried about nothing but expending their energy to deal with the fires and deal with the people that have to evacuate, they have to waste their energy saying, you need to ignore these rumors, this is not true, please let us do our job. Like it has to be addressed, these false stories, because they're so out of control. Like, the original thinking was, oh, these false stories will weed themselves out. Don't give them any credence. Like, people will realize that they're not true. No, that hasn't happened.
Yeah, it's
If anything, it's the opposite. Too
yeah,
many
the big
people.
lie. Tell the
Yeah,
biggest lie you can, and we're living in those kind of times. The
yeah.
bigger the whopper, the more it's believable. Yeah.
This is what I mean. If that example doesn't explain why we need government intervention in the stories that are spread on social media. I mean, whoever started that story, in my opinion, should be arrested because they knew it was false. They incited violence. Like, that's to what purpose? I don't know. Maybe they're just a crazy right-wing nut, or maybe they've got some deeper purpose. Who knows? But they knew what they were doing. They knew they were putting a false story out, whoever they is, wherever this story began. And now
Yeah.
it could be a foreign actor, right? That's the other crazy thing about this, right? It could be coming from Russia or who knows where, that this story gets its infancy and then enough people get it on their feed and it sounds good to them and they share it. and then suddenly it's shared by thousands of people, and it has to be addressed. And officials have to go and say, this story is not true. Stop coming to Oregon. Let us deal with this. Unless you're here to help, unless you're here to fight the fires, it's like, go home. You're not helping the situation. So, real people are getting hurt from the misinformation on Facebook. That's just one example. I don't see how libertarian views are going to help that solve itself.
Yeah. Well, great answer. Well said. I'm not sure. I'm not going to come over the top of you on that, because I think that you made a point that's irrefutable, especially when public health and safety is endangered. I mean, we could go on and on about the libertarian position about when and if there ever should be regulations, and I of course argue almost always against their position. But that being said, I also must say that it's difficult to know who should be in charge of the, what do they say, the chickens in the hen house,
Right.
and who's gonna watch the one who watches, that kind of
Right.
thing. So,
Like right now, people
there are some legitimate
sorry.
arguments.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say right now, like to the people that are like, get upset that Trump is spending his time golfing. It's like, I'm annoyed by that, but to me, the alternative is worse. If he was trying to create legislation, it's like, no, I'm better off if he's not getting involved. So, same thing with government. Like for the most part, you don't want them to get involved, but it's like sometimes, just issues have gone too far.
Just to make it
trust.
just to make it real clear, whenever I speak of government, I mean that in a completely nonpartisan way. I don't mean this administration or even a Democratic, or if there was a liberal administration. When I say the government, or to talk about regulation, I mean that in a very generic, nonpartisan. What is the role of particularly the federal authorities, if they should have a role on this matter or others? It has nothing to do, again, with trust or mistrust of Trump or any other administration, just to be clear.
Okay, well, that's speaking for yourself. And then on the flip side, speaking for myself, it's hard for me to separate the two, because when Obama was in office, I didn't have to agree with everything he did, but I generally trusted that he had people's well-being in mind when he tried to do something. So if there was government intervention in something, I trusted it a lot more then than I would now. And so I can't just adopt one philosophy and say, well, that crosses party lines, because for me, it wouldn't. I trust certain world leaders, and there's others I don't trust. Would I trust, Putin or Duterte or, Kim Jong-un? No, I don't trust that. Would I trust Angela Merkel and Trudeau and whoever else? Yeah, I would trust them. So, which is not a viable solution, right? You can't just change the rules when the party you like comes into power, although that's what Trump seems to be attempting to do. But I mean, that's, I suppose, one argument in favor of libertarianism, because it's like sooner or later, the government you don't like is going to be in power, and you don't want them controlling too much. So,
I completely disagree with that. And the real quick,
sure.
the real quick counter argument to that is, I'm just going to say 4 or 5 names. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Roosevelt, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, even Nixon to a certain extent, at least up till say 70, 71, 72.
Mm-hmm.
Continuity, trust for the most part in most of these administrations. Now, I know Johnson, Vietnam, Nixon, obviously there were trust issues, but basically the average person in the street trusted the federal government. Hell, the federal government, won World War II. The leadership of the government, I should say, built Hoover Dam, built the National Highway System, put a man on the moon. And some people say won the Cold War. I mean, it was the government leadership that provided all these things, Democrat and Republican, conservative and liberal. So, I mean, I think liberals deserve a lot more credit than conservatives. But the bottom line is that we never, for example, even when George Bush came into power in January 2001, as much as I despised him, I never thought that the mechanics of government were just where the levers are falling off. where I had to fear that, maybe they're going to start arresting journalists, or our courts are now corrupt, and the Attorney General of the United States is basically the president's lawyer. I could go on and on and on this point. You see where I'm going. A lot of problems with George Bush, but nothing to the degree that we're seeing now, where it's just a malignant threat to not democracy, but our way of life is threatened here. And so when I talk about government, this is an entirely different scope of conversation in the last 3 or 4 years that I never imagined I would have had 15, 20 years ago. I used to live in Washington. I used to work in Washington. I used to work in the United States Senate. And I walked the hallways, and nobody in the hallways, when you saw somebody on the other side of the aisle, nobody was discourteous.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone was cordial. Everyone was respectful. You always referred to the gentleman from whatever the state it was.
Right.
Will you yield the floor to the gentlelady from Rhode Island? Would you yield the floor? Yes. A lot of, because that's the way democracy works. You've got to compromise. You've got to communicate. You've got to be empathetic. You've got to, I think, even socialize off the clock. I think it's good when John McCain and Joe Biden were great friends.
Right.
I think that's marvelous. Inhofe, one of the most conservative senators in the country from Oklahoma, best friends with Bernie Sanders. Figure that one out.
Right.
I mean, by the way, I think those are wonderful things.
I agree.
These things are essential. They're essential. And so we've lost that. And I think for the most part, we've lost that because of the hostility of the current administration, particularly the man that's in charge now.
But I think I agree that this administration has a lot to do with it. And I can't help but go back to social media. I think if social media existed in the Bush era, we would have been even more divided.
Oh, great point. And maybe you're right. I've never thought of that. I'd like to give it more thought. That would things be as bad? You talked about 9/11 earlier because it was the anniversary yesterday, but that's a great point. I'd have to give it more thought, but you could be right too that maybe, I can't even imagine what it would have been like back then if we had the same levels of echo chambers we have today. Good point, Matt.
And then it's worse, with Obama, it's like, again, without getting too deep into it, but it's almost like a running joke on the left, the tan suit. Like Fox News couldn't find legitimate things to criticize for him, so they would make shit up. And it's like there was basically a channel devoted to criticizing the president, which is not something that existed before, right? I don't know. I never paid attention to Fox News before they became so one-sided, but that's maybe the point, right? They suddenly realized that becoming so one-sided was a good market strategy, right? They suddenly got the biggest share in the world of people watching their news when they became polarizing. So, but that didn't exist before, right? You didn't have a channel that was so one-sided. And so maybe it began with that and continued with social media and now has manifested itself with a president who sends out tweets and can communicate with, the entire population on a regular basis. Like it used to just be the president would give a briefing or, give a speech when they wanted to give a speech. You didn't hear from them every day about every issue, most issues being completely meaningless that Trump is addressing. And I don't think you will again. Like I think the next president, hopefully, will tone down their use of social media compared to Trump. But, I would say it's a combination of all those factors.
Yeah, or again,
so I agree with you completely.
Well, taking the negative of that, maybe the cat's out of the bag, the toothpaste is already out of the tube, and you can't roll it back. And it could be that the expectation of followers, both left and right, will be, hey, if you're going to run for office, you've got to have a social media presence, and maybe you even have to have an army behind you, an army of, I mean that in terms of, communicating ideas and all that. And you have to have that, a movement maybe is a better word. You've got to be part of a movement on either side, or you can't just, say not have a Twitter account or not engage. We're beyond that, unfortunately, now it seems. And I don't know if we can roll that back in. Obviously, it's not going to hopefully be the next president, whoever it is, and hopefully it's Biden, but hopefully there won't be anything like this one, because I can't imagine, for example, Joe Biden or any Republican, if a Republican is elected in, whatever, 2024, can you imagine them tweeting out, 15 tweets a day? And particularly on just
Right,
the
that's the
most
whole point. Right.
ridiculous things. I mean, it'd be one thing, here's our
Right.
latest position on the environment. We have a new embassy opening in Ghana. Congratulations to our new ambassador there. On and what I call officialdoms of government, those tweets would be fine. But these constant attacks, and real quick on this point, is people ask me, why are you always attacking Trump? Why is the left always after Trump? Why can't they leave him alone? Well, the problem is he invites this. He brings this all on himself. Yes. He's constantly, we talk about forest fires. He's always throwing matches and essentially pulling out a flamethrower. And, he constantly, is there a day he doesn't do this? Is there a day he takes a day off? Ever? By the way, if he took a week off, you know what? The media would move on to other things, as best they could. They wouldn't ignore Trump, obviously, but they would move on. So if, essentially Trump obviously I think there's something wrong here, psychologically is what I mean. There's something wrong. There's a screw loose there where he just constantly has to be fed. That's another topic for another show. But I think that a lot of this social media presence on his part is just constantly having to look at his reflection in the mirror. He just constantly needs that, whatever joy that he gets from that. And even the criticism, I think, fuels whatever inside him causes his fires to burn. I think even the criticism is gasoline to his furnace. So I really do think that you're right, that we have a beast here, and it's just gotten so much worse. But I don't know if it could get any worse than it is, because you're not going to have Trump, forever.
Right, and that's the hope, is that I'm not saying that a president should abandon social media altogether. Yeah, you're right. That ship has sailed, but like you said, we don't want that tweets out 15, 20 times a day. I mean, look at Barack Obama's use of social media. I'm just off the top of my head, I would say he posts once every few days, maybe once a week. That's perfect, because
By the way, when
he has something to say.
Yeah, when he was president, I don't think he posted more than maybe he posted a few times a day. I don't really remember. It certainly never made news. I don't recall ever any maybe something major, but I don't recall anything being newsworthy. Did you?
No, it was usually something that was already said in a speech or something, and he was just repeating something he already said. So it's like if you missed his speech, you saw it on social media. I don't think he ever made like any sort of news flash on social media. No, never. And Biden's use right now is a little much because he's campaigning. I think once he's done campaigning, I mean, I don't picture him sitting in front of a screen doing this himself. He has a team, obviously. But are they going to tweet or post as often as Trump has? God, I hope not. I don't, why would they? Like, that takes away from it. Like, when you post only once or twice in a long while, people are going to pay more attention to it because clearly you have something to say. And clearly Trump doesn't have something to say because, it's like the boy who cried wolf.
Less is more.
Yeah. Less is more. I mean, I still maintain sort of an overall pessimism, but I'm trying to stay optimistic, regarding social media.
Well, I'll close by saying this. It's been a very illuminating conversation, and I'm going to go back and listen to this because I'm sure there's other things I'll pick up, by reflecting a little more. But I will say we are constantly evolving, and after Trump is gone, and that could be in 4 months or it could be in 4 years. We don't know, but Trump will be gone at some point, and the landscape will change. The methodology of communication will not change, but at least it'll modify. And, there are going to be these incendiary organizations, trolls, individuals full of hate. They're always going to be out there. And, the question is, in closing, I'll just say we can't control that. Well, we can't control our actions. We can't control what we do. We can't control how we react to that. And I think that it requires maybe not one size fits all. It requires a little of this, a little of that. It requires a little compassion. It requires maybe some tenacity and some real fighting in some cases. Not one size fits all. Every individual that you engage out there in social media probably requires a different tactic and different means of communication.
Mhm.
Sometimes a carrot, sometimes a stick.
Right.
And you and I and anybody listening will not always make the right decisions. I'm going to flub up. I'm going to mess up and make a wrong decision and maybe overstate a few things or give someone the benefit of the doubt. Then they come back and slap me and I look foolish. I mean, we are going to make mistakes. That's part of life, and especially it's part of life when you're on social media because it's all public. Everyone can see it, and no one likes to be embarrassed. But the bottom line is that you do have to have, I think, a lot of tools in the toolbox here. And you use a hammer and use a screwdriver and you use a pair of pliers. They don't all fit the same situation. So I think social media, as we become a little more experienced and versed in various topics, we are going to find that we are going to require more tools and just always have them ready.
I have to agree. Absolutely. Can I share a quick story just that sort of
Love it.
pertains to
Sure.
that?
Love that. Sure.
So I clearly remember in 2008 when the election was taking place, and Facebook was in its relative infancy, and I had a friend who was very active in the Obama campaign, and I supported Obama, but she would post regularly about Obama and about supporting Obama and about what you could do and this and that. And I remember messaging her privately and saying what a turnoff it was. It's like, look, I'm on your side. And this is a good friend of mine. It's like, I'm on your side, but I think this is rubbing people the wrong way. I don't think people want to see politics on Facebook this much. For real. And I think that was the prevailing feeling then. But then there's the argument that social media helped Obama win. I would argue he would have won anyway. But and then there was no looking back when it was like, politicians realized they could mobilize followers on Facebook, and it wasn't just about going door to door and going door to door. God knows that's a turnoff, both for the people that are doing it and the people
for
that
sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go back to those days. Like, I'd rather see
or have the phone ring. The phone ring in the middle of dinner. That was the
Right. I know. Well, now I get texts. Now, I don't know how these people got my number. Hey, Matt, this is Donald Trump Jr. Donate now. We'll match it 5 times. And you even wrote a thing about that. Like, what the fuck does that mean? You'll match it 5 times. Then take that 5 times money and donate it. Like, you don't need any of mine. But right. So I'm getting bothered by texts, but at least I can ignore the texts. But there's no going back from that.
You're on a roll. You're on a roll, Matt. You're on a roll.
I'm just saying. So, 12 years ago, times have changed a shitload in 12 years, and they'll change another shitload in another 12 years. And hopefully they can change for the better.
Yeah, good. Well said. Well, thanks, Matt. That was a good conversation. I look forward to it's funny. We did one topic here. We were going to do 7 or 8. We got 1 down. So we'll have to do something else on the next show. I think this was a lot of fun. I sure enjoyed it. I hope you did.
Oh, absolutely. It's always a pleasure talking with you, Nolan.
All right. So then,
what
was the show? The show is, what's the title again? An Intelligent Conversation.
An Intelligent Conversation. Hopefully it was an intelligent conversation.
For sure. All right. So I'm Nolan Dalla, and I'm with Matt Lessinger, who introduced me earlier. You started the top of the show by introducing me, and I'll introduce you on the next show. I'll tell you more about Matt Lessinger. And those of you who are listening, thanks for giving us all your time. You can comment on either one of our pages on Facebook. We will answer every comment and question. And if you have a suggestion for a topic or maybe an idea for the show, please share it with us. I'm Nolan Dalla. And Matt, any last words?
Nope, you summed it up real well. Thanks so much, Nolan.
Thank you, Matt. And we'll talk again. And thanks again for joining us here on The Intelligent Conversation, Episode 1. See you next time.